William Geroux is on the line with us once more. We talked with him a year or so ago about his wonderful book, The Matthews Men, talking about folks from one particular community involved in merchant shipping during World War II. And we were introduced to something that we didn't really know was a big part of it, with the merchant shipping that would take all of the products across the sea for war materials and other purposes. And, we're back with this book called The Ghost Ships of Archangel, the Arctic Voyage that Defied the Nazis. William Geroux, good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to have you back with us here today, and what a topic this is, because while we didn't know when we had the Matthews Men about merchant shipping and what a key role it played, certainly we probably had no idea that this was going on, the ferrying of materials, war materials, to the Soviet Union to help battle against Nazi Germany during World War II, and how dangerous it was. And that's where this story picks up. How did you find this one?
Well, I actually found it. When I was researching my previous book, The Matthews Men, I came across this story, and I was so interested in it that I was hoping there were some guys from Matthews County in this particular convoy, but there weren't. But I kept reading about it. It was so interesting. I kept reading about it even after I knew I couldn't use it in the book, and I finally had to put it aside and say, maybe I'll pick this up later. And so this book is the result of that.
It is a dangerous proposition when it is properly set up, with escort ships guarding these convoys of merchant seamen as they take their ships to the Soviet Union across some of the coldest and worst weather conditions you can think of. And the U-boats and the battleship Tirpitz, of course, is the one that was most feared at that time. And that's dangerous enough, but then all of a sudden, the British decide that they're going to pull off all of the support vessels and basically leave all these unarmed merchant ships out to sea by themselves to battle U-boats. That's not a really good formula, is it?
No, it's not. And the British, they were in a very difficult position. I have some sympathy for them, but they were trying to, avoid a catastrophe of the destruction of their own warships. But you looking at the result, you can't say that this was a good idea. It was a disaster.
Absolutely, it was. So they get the order to scatter. How many ships are we talking about here?
35 of these merchant ships that just scattered, and each went their. We're basically told, make your own way to Archangel if you can.
Yeah, and
on your own, and don't associate with, don't get anywhere near any other ship, because of any grouping of them would make it that much easier for the Germans to destroy them.
But a small group of them does, and what they do is they go north to an area where nobody should be taking a ship. They make the decision to go into the frozen north, don't they?
They do. They did it because they thought, the one guy was quoted as saying that he thought the Germans were so logical that they would never think that any ship captain would be crazy enough to take his ship into the polar ice field.
And he did. And lo and behold, he finds a couple of other merchant ships and one of the escort ships that decided to stay, to not scatter, and just out of conscience as much as anything else. And so they do. They hide in the polar north, and they're battling a whole different enemy there.
Yes, they're battling they're really concerned throughout that the ice is going to close up on them. They go up into the ice, and they're like dodging icebergs and actually breaking through ice when it gets too thick by. And these ships are not designed to break through ice, but just trying to keep going. They are, nudging the ships farther and farther into the ice until they really couldn't. It got so thick they couldn't go any further, and they were constantly afraid that just a shift in the wind would close in the ice behind them and trap them there. As many ships had, it happened to many ships over the course of history up there. That happened to a lot of ships.
And while they are there, they are listening to their radios and hearing the distress calls from their former convoy mates who are, they're being sunk all over the ocean as the U-boats are just picking them off, and the bomber planes as well. And eventually they know they have to get out of there. They have to get out of the polar waters and back toward their mission to Archangel in Russia. That decision to come back out and to face the Nazi submarine fleet must have been a harrowing one, but they made it, and off they went.
They did, and part of the reason they decided was that the wind was shifting, and they thought, we've got to go now or we may never get out. But yes, nobody was real excited about going back into where the area where they were listening to all these ships being sunk, but there was no other way. They had to do it eventually.
So the Ghost Ships of Archangel is about that journey, and as you were researching this and coming across the stories, what were some of the sources that you had, and who were some of the people that you were able to talk to?
Well, I went, in the Matthews Men, I did a lot of the research in, kitchens and living rooms in Matthews County, Virginia. But for this story, I tried to see as much of the route of PQ-17, the convoy, as I could. So I went to Russia a couple of times, and Iceland and Norway and London as well. And in the States, I interviewed people. I found man I believe is the last living American survivor of PQ-17, living in Santa Barbara, and I found some diaries. I found one incredible diary of a guy that was on one of these ships. The diary was more than 300 handwritten pages, and it was just an extraordinary document, a chronicle of this voyage.
It was play-by-play is what it was, and it tells just a tremendous story, and we are so grateful for you for bringing it to us. As you got into this story, what were some of the big surprises to you as somebody who had researched merchant seamen and the merchant aspect of World War II? What were some of the things that jumped off the page at you?
Part of it was the amount of documentation that, the diary and some other things that were available, and I was able to track down some of the children of some of these men. Unfortunately, we're at a point where a lot of these World War II stories we're right on the edge where it's not going to be possible to talk to anybody who was there. It's all going to have to be done by documents. So it's always nice to find an incredible trove of information. It was also surprising to me being in these places that when you go to Norway and Russia, you see all these memorials and scars of World War II in places that you don't always expect to see them.
Yeah, and well beneath the surface of the ocean on the floor, you're going to find many, many ships and the munitions that they were carrying. What really surprised me was the amount of war materials that were being sent to Russia to help fight the Soviets. And you document that all, as usual, in your style. It's such a great narrative style that tell this story. As I told you with the Matthews Men, it seems like there's a couple of movies in here somewhere. And maybe one day we'll see them on the screen. William Geroux, thanks so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
It is our pleasure. All right, there you go. The voice of Indiana County, WCCS, AM 1160 and 101.1 FM.